September 1944, Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, Versailles. France General Dwight Eisenhower sat behind his desk with jaw clenched, fingers drumming on a file folder containing the latest intelligence reports on George Patton's insubordination. Outside his office, staff officers spoke in hushed tones because everyone knew what was about to happen. Patton was being called in, and when Patton got called in like this, careers ended. What Eisenhower said in that room would either save or destroy the most brilliant battlefield commander America had produced since the Civil War. V. Before we dive deeper, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. What's your take on Patton? Military genius or liability? We love hearing from history buffs around the world. Let's rewind to August 1944, just weeks before that explosive meeting when Patton's Third Army had completed one of the most spectacular advances in military history, racing across France and covering over 400 miles in less than a month. Patton was convinced he could end the war before Christmas as his army had momentum. The Germans were reeling, and the weather was still favorable. All he needed was fuel, ammunition, and permission to keep going. But on August 28th, Eisenhower ordered Patton to halt his advance because British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery had convinced Allied High Command that his forces should receive priority for supplies to launch Operation Market Garden through Holland. Patton was furious, seeing it as political theater, giving the British a chance to claim victory after American forces had done the heavy lifting across France. In his diary that night, Patton wrote words suggesting Eisenhower was weak, politically compromised, and more concerned with keeping the British happy than winning the war. But Patton didn't just write it in his diary, he said it out loud to staff officers, to fellow commanders, to anyone who would listen. The comments got back to Supreme Headquarters within days, as they always did in the tight-knit world of senior command. General Omar Bradley, who commanded the 12th Army Group and was Patton's immediate superior, tried to run interference by calling Patton. On September 2nd, the conversation was tense, as Bradley warned, "You need to stop talking about Ike. Like that, it's getting around and undermining his authority." Patton's response was defiant, saying he was speaking what every commander was thinking and that if Bradley couldn't accept that, maybe Eisenhower should relieve him. At headquarters, Eisenhower was dealing with pressure from every direction. Churchill wanted Montgomery's operations supported. Roosevelt wanted American forces to get credit for ending the war. And now his most aggressive field commander was openly questioning his leadership. Captain Harry Butcher, Eisenhower's naval aide, kept detailed diaries, noting that Ike was angrier than he'd seen him in months, with a cold kind of anger, talking about relieving Patton. Eisenhower had defended Patton before, after the soldier-slapping incident in Sicily. But this was different. This wasn't a momentary loss of temper, but calculated insubordination. On September 7th, Eisenhower sent a message to Third Army Headquarters. General Patton will report to SH Headquarters on September 10th at 1400 hours for a personal meeting with the Supreme Commander. Attendance mandatory. When the message arrived, Patton's staff went silent, and Major General Hobart Gay later wrote that the room felt like a funeral parlor. Patton himself seemed almost relieved, telling Gay, "Well, Hop, I've finally done it. I've talked myself out of a job, but I'll be damned if I'll apologize for wanting to win this war the right way." September 10th arrived, and Patton drove to Versailles in his staff car, his demeanor calm and almost fatalistic according to his aide Colonel Cobb. At SHAEF Headquarters, officers who saw Patton arrive reported he was in full dress uniform with every ribbon perfectly placed in boots, gleaming whatever was about to happen. He would face it looking like a soldier. Eisenhower's secretary showed Patton into the office at exactly 2 p.m., closed the door, and for the next 45 minutes only two men knew what was said. Eisenhower didn't waste time with pleasantries, getting straight to the point. According to Patton's diary, "George, I'm going to be direct. You've been criticizing my decisions, questioning my strategy, undermining Allied command structure repeatedly despite warnings, and I want to know why." Patton reportedly stood at attention throughout this opening salvo, then responded with something Eisenhower wasn't expecting. He said, "You're right, sir. I have been critical. I have questioned your decisions, and I stand by every word because I believe you're making a mistake with a strategy." Most officers faced with a career-ending confrontation would have backpedaled and apologized. But Patton doubled down. Eisenhower's anger peaked, but remained controlled as he said, "Let me be very clear. I don't care if you disagree with my strategy. I encourage debate among my commanders. But what I will not tolerate is a subordinate who takes those disagreements public and makes it impossible for me to maintain a unified command." Patton felt something shift in that moment, Because Eisenhower wasn't angry that Patton disagreed, he was angry about how Patton had handled that disagreement. Patton acknowledged the difference between professional disagreement and insubordination, admitting he'd crossed that line. Then he said something that would test whether Eisenhower was the leader everyone believed him to be. "General Eisenhower, if you believe I'm hurting this command, if you think I'm damaging Allied unity, then relieve me now. I'll hand you my stars on the spot and go home. No appeals, no complaints, no drama." According to every account, time seemed to stop as Eisenhower stared at Patton, who stood at attention, waiting for the hammer to fall. Eisenhower later told General Marshall that he spent those silent seconds weighing everything: Patton's brilliance, his insubordination, the mission, the politics, the lives of hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Then Eisenhower spoke quietly but clearly. "George, I'm not going to take your stars, but I need you to understand something. I'm not running a debating society. I'm commanding a coalition force made up of multiple nations with different interests. And my job isn't just to win battles, but to hold this alliance together long enough to win the war." He admitted that Patton was probably right about the August opportunity, and that they could have ended the war faster, which stunned Patton, who hadn't expected this acknowledgement. Eisenhower continued, explaining that he saw the supply situation across the entire front, the political pressure from London and Washington, Montgomery's capabilities, and the big picture that sometimes required decisions that didn't make sense from Patton's perspective. Then his tone became more personal. "You're the best attack commander I have, probably the best anyone has. But I need more than battlefield brilliance. I need loyalty. I need trust. I need to know that when I give you an order, you'll follow it without undermining me." Patton responded with the most honest statement of his career, admitting he'd always had opinions about commanders' decisions, but acknowledging there was a difference between having opinions and expressing them in a way that was insubordinate and unprofessional. Then Patton said something Eisenhower would remember for the rest of his life. "I want to stay. Sir, I want to command Third Army. I want to drive into Germany and finish this war. But I want to do it as part of your team, following your strategy, supporting your command. If you'll have me." After another silence, Eisenhower nodded slowly and made a deal. "You stop the public criticism. You stop questioning my decisions to other officers. You bring your concerns directly to me in private, and I'll listen. But once I make a decision, you execute it without reservation." Patton agreed, and Eisenhower added one more thing in a harder voice. "This is your last chance. One more episode of insubordination, and you're done. I'll put you on a plane back to the States so fast your head will spin. And George, I will do it even if it costs us the war, because command discipline matters that much." Eisenhower stood up, walked around his desk to where Patton stood at attention, and extended his hand, saying, "George, I need you. This army needs you. But I need the version of you that can be part of a team can. You give me that?" Patton shook his hand and gave his word, and the meeting was over after less than an hour. But it had fundamentally changed the relationship between America's Supreme Commander and its most controversial general. Colonel Cudman later described Patton's expression when he emerged as looking like a man who'd been given a second chance and knew it, with no bravado or swagger, just quiet determination. On the drive back, Patton was silent for miles before finally turning to Cudman and saying, "Ike could have fired me. He should have fired me. But he didn't. He gave me another chance, and I won't waste it." That night, Patton wrote what many historians consider his most mature diary entry. "I went to Versailles, expecting to lose my command. Instead, I gained a new understanding of what it means to be part of something larger than yourself. Eisenhower is carrying a burden I hadn't fully appreciated. My job is to win battles, but his job is to win the war. And those aren't the same thing." Eisenhower wrote to General Marshall 2 days later, stating he believed Patton now understood the boundaries and remained their best offensive commander, gambling that he'd channel his aggression toward the enemy rather than Allied command structure. For 3 months, that gamble paid off, as Patton followed orders without public complaint, bringing his concerns directly to Eisenhower or Bradley in private, while the Third Army continued driving east. Then came December 1944, and the German offensive in the Ardennes. And that's when the September meeting proved its worth. When Eisenhower called that emergency conference at Verdun and asked Patton to do the impossible, turn his army 90 degrees and attack north in 3 days, Patton didn't hesitate, argue, or question. He simply said, "Yes, sir. I'll be there." The relief of Bastogne that followed was Patton fulfilling the promise he'd made in September to be part of the team, to follow orders, to trust his supreme commander. After the war, both men reflected on that meeting. Eisenhower wrote in his memoirs that dealing with Patton required understanding that his aggressive instincts needed to be channeled, that the September confrontation established boundaries and mutual respect. Patton, who died in December 1945 from injuries in a car accident, spoke of Eisenhower with genuine respect in interviews before his death, saying, "Ike understood how to handle me. He didn't try to make me into something I wasn't. He just gave me clear lines I couldn't cross. And when I needed it, he gave me a second chance." That's leadership. So what can we learn from this moment about leadership, accountability, and second chances? First, great leaders know how to discipline without destroying. Eisenhower recognized that Patton's value outweighed his flaws as long as those flaws could be managed. Second, accountability cuts both. Eisenhower held Patton accountable, but also acknowledged his strategic concerns had merit. Third, the best professional relationships can survive honest confrontation. The September meeting cleared the air and established mutual understanding instead of ending their working relationship. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Then share this video with anyone who appreciates real leadership and real history. Drop a comment below about whether you've ever had to give someone a second chance or been given one yourself. George Patton walked into that office ready to hand back his command, but walked out with a mission to save an army. And that transformation happened because Dwight Eisenhower knew when to be hard and when to be wise. That's the lesson of September 1944. That's what Eisenhower said when Patton offered his